The rain hammered against the windows of the secluded cabin, a relentless drumbeat that seemed to echo the tension inside. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Two couples sat across from each other, glasses of wine in hand, their laughter forced and their smiles strained. The weekend had started as a daring experiment, a wife swap orchestrated to reignite the spark in their stagnant marriages. But now, as the storm raged outside, it was clear that something had gone terribly wrong. The idea had been Zoey's. She had read about it in a magazine, a story about couples who swapped partners for a weekend to break the monotony of their marriages. At first, her husband, Rowan, had been hesitant. "It's weird," he had said, his brow furrowed. But Zoey had insisted. "We need this, Dan. We've been stuck in a rut for years. This could be fun, exciting even." Reluctantly, Rowan had agreed. They had approached their closest friends, Aaliyah and Remi, who had been equally intrigued and apprehensive. Aaliyah, a vivacious woman with a sharp wit, had been the first to laugh it off. "Why not? It's just a weekend. What's the worst that could happen?" Remi, a quiet and reserved man, had nodded in agreement, though his eyes betrayed his unease. The plan was simple. They would spend the weekend at Rowan and Zoey's remote cabin in the woods. On Friday night, they would have dinner together, and then the swap would begin. Zoey would spend the night with Remi, and Aaliyah would be with Rowan. The next day, they would reconvene and discuss their experiences. It was supposed to be a harmless experiment, a way to explore their desires and reconnect with their own partners. But by Saturday morning, the cracks had already begun to show. Zoey woke up in Remi's arms, her head pounding from the wine they had consumed the night before. She had expected to feel a thrill, a sense of forbidden excitement. Instead, she felt empty. Remi had been gentle, almost too gentle, and the experience had left her feeling more disconnected than ever. She slipped out of bed and padded to the bathroom, avoiding her reflection in the mirror. Downstairs, Rowan and Aaliyah were already in the kitchen. Aaliyah was flipping pancakes, her laughter ringing through the room. Rowan stood close to her, his hand brushing against hers as he handed her a spatula. Zoey froze in the doorway, a knot tightening in her stomach. She had expected jealousy, but not this sharp, searing pain that felt like a knife twisting in her chest. "Morning," Aaliyah said brightly, her smile faltering as she caught sight of Zoey's expression. "Everything okay?" Zoey forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired." Rowan avoided her gaze, his cheeks flushing. Zoey's mind raced. Had something happened between them? Had they crossed a line? She wanted to ask, to demand answers, but the words stuck in her throat. Remi joined them a few minutes later, his presence only adding to the tension. The four of them sat down to breakfast. The silence, heavy and oppressive. The storm outside seemed to mirror the turmoil inside the cabin, the wind howling like a wounded animal. By evening, the tension had reached a boiling point. The wine flowed freely, loosening tongues and lowering inhibitions. Aaliyah, emboldened by alcohol, began to flirt openly with Rowan, her laughter too loud, her touches too lingering. Zoey watched, her jealousy simmering beneath the surface. Remi, meanwhile, grew increasingly withdrawn, his eyes darting between the three of them. "Maybe this was a mistake," Remi said suddenly, his voice cutting through the noise. "This whole thing, it's not right." Aaliyah rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on, Remi. Don't be such a prude, it's just a bit of fun. Fun? Remy's voice was sharp, his hands clenched into fists. This isn't fun. This is messed up. Rowan stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. Maybe Remy's right. Maybe we should call it a night. But Aaliyah wasn't ready to let it go. No, she said, her voice rising. We started this and we're going to finish it. You're all just scared to admit how much you're enjoying this. Zoey had had enough. You think this is enjoyable? Watching you throw yourself at my husband? Aaliyah's eyes narrowed. Oh, please, Zoey. Don't act like you're innocent. You were the one who suggested this whole thing. You wanted to shake things up, didn't you? Well, here we are. The argument escalated, voices rising and accusations flying. Remi tried to intervene, but Aaliyah shoved him away, her anger boiling over. In a fit of rage, she grabbed a knife from the table and lunged at Zoey. Rowan reacted instinctively, stepping between them. But it was too late. The knife plunged into his chest, the sound of tearing flesh drowned out by Aaliyah's scream. The storm had passed, leaving behind an eerie calm. The cabin was silent, the air thick with the metallic tang of blood. Rowan's body lay on the floor, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Zoey sat beside him, her hands stained red, her face pale and expressionless. Aaliyah was curled up in a corner, sobbing uncontrollably. Remi stood by the window, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. What do we do now? Aaliyah whispered, her voice trembling. We can't just leave him here. Remi turned to face her, his eyes cold. We don't have a choice. If we call the police, we'll all go to jail. This was your fault, Aaliyah. You killed him. Aaliyah shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I didn't mean to. I didn't. Zoey stood up, her movements slow and deliberate. We bury him, she said, her voice hollow. We bury him, and we never speak of this again. Remi nodded, his jaw clenched. Together, the three of them carried Rowan's body outside, the ground still soft from the rain. They dug a shallow grave. At the edge of the woods, the sound of the shovel hitting dirt the only noise in the stillness. When it was done, they stood in silence, the weight of what they had done pressing down on them. The police arrived at the cabin a week later, tipped off by a concerned neighbor who had noticed the absence of the usually lively couple. Zoey, Aaliyah, and Remi were questioned, their stories carefully rehearsed. They claimed that Rowan had gone on a solo hiking trip and never returned. The police found no evidence to contradict their story, and the case was eventually closed. But the guilt lingered, a constant shadow that followed them wherever they went. Zoey moved out of the cabin, unable to bear the memories it held. She relocated to a small apartment in the city, where the noise and bustle provided a temporary distraction from the gnawing guilt that consumed her. Nights were the hardest. She would lie awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of that weekend in her mind. The sound of the knife piercing Rowan's flesh, the look of shock on his face, the way his body crumpled to the floor. It haunted her dreams and waking moments alike. She began to see a therapist, but no amount of talking could erase the image of her husband's lifeless eyes. Aaliyah and Remi's marriage fell apart, the strain of their shared secret too much to bear. Aaliyah moved out of their home, seeking solace in the anonymity of a new town. She tried to start over, but the weight of what she had done followed her like a ghost. She drank heavily, trying to numb the pain, but the alcohol only deepened her despair. Remi, on the other hand, threw himself into work, burying his emotions under a mountain of tasks and responsibilities. He avoided relationships, terrified of letting anyone get close enough to see the darkness within him. They drifted apart, each haunted by the events of that fateful weekend, their lives forever altered by a single, impulsive act. And in the woods, beneath a patch of freshly turned earth, Rowan's body lay undisturbed, a silent witness to the deadly consequences of a wife swap gone wrong. The cabin, once a place of laughter and joy, stood empty and desolate, a monument to the lives that had been shattered within its walls. The forest reclaimed the land around it, the trees growing taller and the underbrush thicker, as if nature itself sought to erase the memory of what had happened. But the truth remained, buried but not forgotten. A dark secret that would forever bind Zoey, Aaliyah, and Remi together in a web of guilt and regret. Years passed, but the scars of that weekend never fully healed. Zoey occasionally drove by the cabin, though she never dared to stop. Aaliyah changed her name and moved across the country, but she could never outrun the past. Remi stayed in town, living a solitary life, his guilt a constant companion, and in the quiet moments when the world was still, they each wondered if they could have done something differently, if they could have stopped the chain of events that led to Rowan's death. But the past was unchangeable, and all that remained was the heavy burden of their shared secret, a reminder of the deadly consequences of their choices.